My parents want my sister to walk down the aisle at my wedding first, so my husband pretends to go along. He gets them to pay for the most expensive wedding, and their plan is ruined. My parents loved my sister more. I don't mean in subtle ways, either. If my sister accused me of something, they'd believe it and punish me. If I accused her, they wouldn't believe me. Even if there were undeniable proof, they'd still give her a lesser punishment and try to find a way to scold me in tandem. My birthday cake had to be a flavor she wanted. Hers did not, and my parents always denied knowing I didn't like that type of cake. They always bought her a bit more than for me. We went to where she wanted, even if it was an event that should be about me. My sister grew up spoiled and didn't like me. She just used me as a punching bag. Eventually, my mom came to talk to me about my impending graduation. She told me that since they were paying for my sister's college tuition, they had no money to pay for mine, so it would be better for me to start working immediately after graduation and wait until my sister finished uni to see if they could afford something for me. If I decided to stay home, I'd have to pay for all my stuff, some of the bills, and rent. I pointed out I could get student loans. Mom said yes, except no. That is, because they were so caring towards me, and I had such bad judgment, they would decide if a college was worth my getting in debt or not. They had no idea about my grades and never believed in my capabilities. I never believed they would eventually pay it if I worked and waited for my sister to graduate. I had been preparing for college for a long time. I could barely go out. My friendships were slim, so I had a lot of time to study. I studied because I saw college as my only chance to be free. Well, the time came, and I worked my ass off and got a scholarship. Not anywhere like the Ivy League or anything like law or medical school, but it was a good enough course in a decent college with a full scholarship. Knowing my sister would hate it and try to stop me via my parents, I put my achievements on social media at the same time I told them. I even forced myself to thank them in the post. They weren't happy but couldn't do anything. College was my savior. I started being happy. I met my husband around this time. My husband is the guy who claps back immediately. He loves drama in that he loves to resolve it. He's the guy that if he doesn't immediately reply to a slight, you better start worrying because he won't forgive and forget. He's just doing something worse for revenge. When we discussed marriage, we decided we didn't care much about the ceremony due to our budget, as we'd rather spend on a dream trip to Europe for our honeymoon. We sent out the engagement announcement and the save the date for a few months later. At this point, my parents naturally demanded that they meet my man. My parents and my sister sat him down. After grumbling about not being okay with him, my judgment, etc., they proclaimed they would pay for my wedding. My sister would walk down the aisle at my wedding first, in a wedding dress. Their excuse was that it wasn't okay for a younger sister to marry first, so it was only fair if my sister had at least the experience of it. On my venue, with pictures being taken, and the dress, and she'd have a cake later, etc. He went back to my parents. He said he probed and thought I wouldn't be down with it. However, he didn't see the issue and, not wanting the family to fall apart, would be down to helping them do it. He pointed out I don't like conflict, so if I was surprised by it, I might not throw a tantrum in front of all the people. Thus, he suggested a compromise. They'd help pay for stuff. This way, I would feel even more pressure not to say anything, as not only would we be public, but I'd be grateful for the help they gave, which mollify me. And so began the months of deception, where my parents and sister thought they were tricking me, and my husband and I were milking them. How? Well, rather than pay for the wedding and lay low, my parents wanted input in everything. What we did was thus: we'd go, say, to check the drink and menu options. We'd then accept the lowest or second lowest priced option. My husband would then secretly take my sister there to try it out, then sigh and say it's a pity we don't want to abuse my parents' goodwill so we wouldn't get the best options. Cue my sister demanding my parents pay for the best. My parents would then tell me not to worry, and they'd pay for the most expensive. The same was done with the photographer. Flowers. My husband handed my sister a bouquet of the flowers we wanted, then sadly expressed how I wanted some other, tasteless flowers. My parents told me they wanted us to go with the flowers, and they'd pay for it. Wedding dress. We hit a minor snag here. My parents wanted me to wear a hideous dress, but he never told them we hired security. It was really funny. My husband and I, who had sincerely considered a courthouse wedding to focus the cost on our honeymoon, had this extravagant wedding and barely spent a dime. We called it back pay for emotional damages from my parents. Soon, the day came. The plan my parents/sister/husband had come up with was to wait until everyone was seated. Since the bride always comes out late, they'd have my sister arrive at that precise time and walk down the aisle. As the guests and my parents arrived, all they could see was a woman with a list of names to check. Only after my parents arrived and sat down did we bring out security. A guy that looked like a bodyguard. We told him not to allow my sister in and even agreed to pay a handsome tip if he didn't reveal we told him that. Soon, the time arrived. My parents got a text. My sister was less than 5 minutes away, so my dad told people to start. My bridesmaids had been told to follow his lead beforehand, so they obeyed without checking with me. After they all went down and took their places, my dad stood up at the entrance as if waiting for me. During this time, a friend who was not at the wedding party texted me to get ready. Well, as soon as my dad took his position, the bridal song started playing, and the doors opened. I come in. My dad looked aghast at me being there. He tried glancing behind me, but you couldn't see the venue entrance from where we were, so he couldn't see what happened to my sister. And then his phone rang. I saw the caller ID, and it was her. He just left me there with a mumbled, "Something came up." There were gasps and confusion all around. The friend in on it loudly asked what happened. In a teary voice, I lied and said he told me. It wasn't supposed to be me there. The friend then loudly went, "What did he mean by it shouldn't be you?" So that as many people as possible could hear and spread it. Then went, "I will go and check," and ran off. We decided to do this to make her create hell with the security and stop my dad from returning and stopping the ceremony or something. At some point, my mom also left. At this point, my husband's dad quickly ran over and took my arm. He'd been forewarned he might need to. Watching him run desperately to me helped me smile. I walked down the aisle to whispers as people discussed what happened. Some left to check, too. When I reached my husband, though, all was well. He made me feel better. The following is the sum account from friends, family, the security guy, and my husband that I received afterward. My sister did arrive in a wedding dress. The security refused to let her in. The three naturally said it wasn't a secret and threw my husband under the bus. At this point, my husband was summoned. When he came over, he put on his best look of confusion and denied having ever agreed to something so ridiculous. When they insisted he did, he demanded proof, and of course, they couldn't produce any. My sister was screaming and crying and sat on the floor, kicking her legs like a kid, watching my parents and sister get ripped apart by anyone and everyone who came out to check. The drama was delicious. After years and years of being accused of stuff and not believed, to watch them have a taste was one of the best wedding gifts. My mother was crying. My dad kept changing from purple to white, and my sister was still on the floor, crying and screaming. They kept insisting that my husband was in on it, but people kept asking why my husband would agree, why there was no proof, and why they wanted my sister to do this to my wedding, and they had no good answer to any of it. Eventually, they were told to leave and had no choice but to do so. My dad had to drag my sister up as she refused to leave the ground. Of course, the three have tried to contact me since that whole thing. I've refused calls because my husband insisted on keeping a paper trail. It was a smart thing because my sister eventually messaged me. She blamed me for her humiliation and called my husband a two-faced snake that fooled them for months. My husband took my phone, screenshot the call logs, screenshot my sister's message, screenshot some messages of my parents demanding I pick up the phone, and sent it all to my family group chat. He wrote a message and said group chat begging my family for help, as I was now being harassed by them constantly. He begged his family to help stop them from trying to ruin my honeymoon now that they had failed to ruin my wedding. My family assured him they'd take care of it. And indeed, since then, we've had silence. All in all, while I obviously would have preferred to have a normal, loving family at my wedding, at least for once in my life, they not only failed to—
Am I wrong for helping my brother run away from his wedding? So I have two older brothers, and this is about the middle one. So my parents divorced when we were very young because of my mum's insane jealousy. She very quickly rebounded with a guy that had 2 kids and had shared custody for a little while. But when my dad got remarried, she went crazy. She called his new wife every horrible name under the sun. And she even tried to claim that he was cheating whilst they were still married. I was always so much closer to my dad and my brothers because my mum was just always so mean to me. Long story short, my stepmom actually passed away from a really bad car accident. So my mum decided she was going to take us on a fun trip to celebrate something, and we have literally never seen our mum happier. However, once we realised what was actually going on, we obviously got upset and started crying. My mum got really angry about this and said only worthless people cry over whores. And needless to say, things got nuclear. So my dad ended up applying for full custody and visitation for her. He always left the line of communication open for us, and he even paid for us to go and see her when she moved away. It was still so bad. As soon as we were 18, we were lowering contact with her straight away. So the last time we saw her was actually at my graduation, and she let everyone who would hear know that we were really ungrateful kids. And her new husband would also call us really nasty names too. And safe to say, we've had no contact ever since. So my brother Sam started dating his now ex about 3 years ago. He had heard all the stories but believed that we were just being dramatic. They had many issues due to her opinions, but eventually she did drop the whole "you need to reconcile with your mother" crusade. So during the wedding planning, there was no sign of things going wrong at all. Lo and behold, who was sitting front and centre? My mum, husband, and 2 kids. I obviously immediately panicked and called my brothers. Sam thought that maybe she'd found out the date and just wanted to crash, so he called his ex to warn her of the potential drama. But she said it's fine because she was the one that had invited them. Sam was like, "You need to come and get me," whilst our older brother dealt with things at the church. So we went home and we barricaded ourselves in. His ex and all of her family and friends tried to come and make sense with him. Even my mum's husband came and said, "We knew you'd always been worthless." So now all the dust settled, most of Sam's friends are on his side. So is most of my dad's side of the family. His ex's parents keep threatening to sue him for all the money that they paid for the wedding, and he said he would rather pay them back than marry someone that had betrayed him. My family fully supports Sam, but the backlash has been huge. So what do you think? Am I wrong for wearing a wedding dress to a wedding? So this girl I've been friends with for a few years recently got engaged. A week ago, I got a DM from her saying she was having a small costume party to celebrate her getting engaged. So I asked if there was a theme and she said there wasn't. So I'm a cosplayer, so I had a lot of choices. So I thought it'd be really funny to go to an engagement party as a corpse bride. When I arrived at the house yesterday, everything seemed completely normal. A few people complimented my costume and I was having so much fun. After about 10 minutes, my friend's fiance walked out in a black tuxedo and told everyone that this was actually their wedding. Apparently my friend saw a video of someone else doing this and she wanted to do the same. He asked us all then to go to the backyard so that the ceremony could begin. At that point, I went straight up to him. I asked if I should quickly go home, change my outfit and come back before the ceremony even started. He told me it was absolutely fine considering that I didn't know it was a wedding. So I trusted him and I just followed everybody outside. They got married and everything seemed good. So the reception was at the house, so everyone just walked back inside and picked up where we left off. I kept trying to talk to my friend and celebrate with her, but she kept making excuses not to talk to me. I assumed it was because she was just tired and, it was such a big day. And I thought maybe she just wanted some space and alone time. I decided just not to bother her after that and the party soon ended. So about half an hour after I got home, my phone started blowing up with notifications. It was my friend and she was cussing me out, saying that I ruined her wedding day. I was obviously really confused and asked, what did I do? And that only made her even more angry. She told me that it was basic knowledge not to wear a wedding dress to someone else's wedding day. I reminded her that I did not know that it was a wedding. And I said, I asked your now husband if he wanted me to go home and change, and he said that it was absolutely fine. So she didn't respond to that, but then I got a text from the husband asking why I would tell her that he said it was absolutely fine not to change. And I was like, babe, you were the one that told me it was fine. And then he says that I should have changed anyway. And now, of course, it's my fault that the two of them are fighting over this. I tried texting and saying that I was sorry and that if I'd have known, I obviously wouldn't have done this. But I woke up today to find that her and her husband had blocked me on everything. So what do you think?
My selfish sister-in-law scheduled her wedding around my due date. Now, she's insisting that my husband attend and miss the birth of our first baby. My husband's brother recently proposed to his girlfriend, of 4 months, and they plan on getting married when I'm 38 weeks pregnant and they live about 7 hours away from us. I don't like his fiancée due to some very off-the-wall and inappropriate comments she made during my mother-in-law's funeral. She said that my mother-in-law made it hard for everyone because she died of many complications from diabetes and taking care of her made it quite hard. She also said that she wanted to be married that year but couldn't do it because it was bad luck to be married the same year a family member died. When she asked me to be a part of her bridal party, I thought cool, this is a chance for me to get to really know her and maybe be friends outside the first time I met her, which was at the funeral. She hadn't set the date yet, but I told her I was pregnant and when I was due and that while I didn't want her to schedule their wedding around me, my husband and I also wouldn't be able to attend if it was closer to my due date. They set the date and she asked about dresses for me when I told her that while we were very happy for her, we wouldn't be able to come. She asked why, and I repeated what I told her before she set the date, that I couldn't travel far that late in pregnancy. She had a meltdown. She insisted that I could still come since it was only a 7-hour drive and that if I couldn't come my husband needed to come still because it was his brother. I said this is our first child, and if I go into labor I will not be doing it by myself nor will my husband miss the birth of our child to attend anyone's wedding. She called me selfish for missing her wedding and said that if at least my husband didn't go we wouldn't speak to them again. She texted everyone in the family group chat that I was abusive and controlling for not letting my husband attend their wedding without context, saying I did not like her. I hadn't planned on telling all of our extended family we were pregnant since I was still in my first trimester. So my husband just texted back saying I am not forcing him to do anything, but we agreed not to tell everyone we were pregnant yet, so our phones have been going off for hours with texts about setting our pettiness aside to be happy for the couple. Even those who know I'm pregnant and would be close to my due date say I should at least let my husband go. Eventually, my husband responded to the family members who reached out to us individually and told them the situation, including the fact sister-in-law was informed of our due date and that we wouldn't be able to attend if they chose a wedding date close to it. His brother finally called him back, and he spoke with him directly. My husband explained how it was 100% his decision to stay with me and had a heart-to-heart talk in which a lot was discussed. His brother was surprised about the ultimatum and apologized for his fiancée's behavior, explaining they recently had a miscarriage, news to us, and she likely was taking out her feelings, including jealousy, on me. He also told my husband he would talk to sister-in-law and change the date since they hadn't signed a contract with vendors yet. He said he wants us there since we are close, so he'll either move the wedding forward or push it back. I went from planning our wedding to planning to break up, all because of a dress. I've not been lucky in love. I thought that I hit the jackpot with my current boyfriend, now fiancé, because he was so sweet, funny, caring and gentle. I love him still. We were discussing marriage and moving in together up until an hour ago, but tonight marked a breaking point. I'd been ignoring so many things that he did that made me uncomfortable because the other times were great. I rationalized that he was so much better than my exes. He let me set the pace for our intimacy life but would still push a little more and frame it as exposure therapy, or complain that we tried one thing once but never again, or not soon enough again. He would grope me constantly, pout if I didn't let him, and if I tried to stop him he'd playfully continue, all while justifying it because it was a compliment that I was just too sexy to resist. It got to the point I was actively avoiding any and all innuendo, or anything that could be considered dirty, And if someone else said something, like pickle, I would start to feel gross and dirty because he'd just give me a look or make an intimacy joke about us, depending on company. Before going out to see him, I started wearing biker shorts over my underwear and 2 sports bras to hide my admittedly small chest, and I stopped wearing anything form-fitting, to his vocal disapproval, and I started angling myself so my body was out of easy reach. I stopped sleeping well next to him, lying awake and waiting for when he'd roll over in his sleep off my breast so I could move toward the edge. If I brought up topics, actions or comments that made me uncomfortable, he weaseled around it with an excuse and turned it back to me about how I was lashing out at him for no reason. If we went out to eat, he wouldn't look to see if there was anything that I could eat, allergies, and even refused to leave to find somewhere else because a cocktail would be enough for me. Plus, he always made the decision too, because he refuses to eat anything beyond his limited palate and would try just about anything to get out of it. This includes making new plans on the same day as an established date with his friends and inviting me along because he forgot, or complain and pout at the restaurant and be sullen the rest of the night until he got to grope me. I could go on, and that isn't fair to either of us. He has so many good qualities to him and he'd be well suited to someone more like him. But all it took for me to finally decide to break up was wanting to wear a certain dress tonight. My great-grandmother, who helped raise me, gave it to me for my high school graduation. It has special sentimental value. I feel powerful and confident in it. It's also one of the few dresses and feminine outfits I wear. I wanted to wear it to dinner tonight, but the last time I wore a dress he tried to grab my butt under the fabric and made a joke about easy access. All I could think about was how I knew that he would leer at me and immediately try to grab and paw at me if I showed up wearing this dress. I didn't want my Graham's dress to be yet another article of clothing that made me feel dirty when I put it on. At dinner tonight I'll tell him it's not working out and I'll give back the ring. It's just so surreal to think it'll all be over soon. Update: breaking up with my fiancé did not go at all well. I'm still feeling stupid and trying to process everything, so I'm sorry if I'm unclear at any point. During the talk, I try to keep the focus on me, the things that I do or didn't do that weren't suited to his needs and wants, ways that he deserved better, his positive qualities, how anyone would be happy to have him and he deserved someone that appreciated him to the fullest. I pointed out my clothing style and work lifestyle, how he hated whenever I would ask him to go to a work party and dress up, to which he asked why we had to break up at all when I could just go to them alone. Problem solved. But when I said it felt unequal, considering I went to his functions, he got mad that I was saying he didn't do enough, which I didn't mean to say, and so I apologized. I didn't mean to turn it back on him and try to blame him in the conversation, but it came off that way big time. It turned into an argument all the same, with him pushing me to go on with my laundry list of reasons why he's a horrible person that doesn't give enough despite all that he's done for me. He wouldn't listen no matter how I tried to emphasize that this was on me, not him, that we were just not on the same pages about a few important matters and going forward into a marriage without those resolved would be a mistake. In hindsight, that was really cruel of me to say. I know I said it all wrong and apologized immediately. I didn't mean to imply he was a mistake, but that's how it came across to him. He expressed his frustration that I led him on and let him think we had a future together when all along I wasn't willing to just try a little harder to meet his needs. He said it showed that he was the only one in love all along because when you love someone, you give of yourself without keeping tally. When both people give freely, both are happy, but when only one side does, then one partner is slowly breaking down. He brought up how a typical guy would have gone elsewhere when starved of intimacy, that normal couples have intimacy multiple times a week, not just once or twice a week, but he'd been willing to take the scraps and overlook that until I was ready for that level because he loved me and wanted to spend our lives together. It ended with him telling me that it was fine, then thanking me for finally getting a conscience and sparing him from a sexless marriage, and wishing me good luck finding a guy who agrees to wait forever. Before that there was a lot more said along the lines of effort and knowing what one deserves out of a partner, but it all seemed to go in circles. He didn't want to stop discussing it until it was settled, telling me how even in breaking up I wanted to take the easy way out because I kept trying to point out we were going in circles, which I proved I was never as invested in the relationship as he was. Again, I'm really sorry if I sound disjointed in this, I just needed it out. I need to think a lot about the past few years and my behavior. What is the most unexpected drama you have seen get exposed at a wedding? I realized I was attending a fake wedding. I don't think my relationship with my brother will ever be the same. My brother and I have always been as close as twins. Our closeness is a foundation in our family. One of the true consistent relationships. When we'd fight, the whole family would feel it and try to fix it because of how unnatural it feels for everyone. He gave me away at my wedding. I named a child after him. We have matching tattoos. We talk on the phone almost every day. Then he changed. He started planning his wedding with his husband and asked me to be a groomsman while his friend Sarah would be his best man. Everyone thought this was odd because of his role at my wedding. On top of that, none of us really knew or had met his friend. I expressed how it hurt my feelings and was met with, "My wedding isn't about you." Okay. Fine. I'll do what you ask. During the planning he called me every day. We sent ideas and I helped with making stuff. I didn't mind. I decided early on to not focus on titles just to make this day as amazing as possible for my brother. He asked me to be a flower fairy because this was a gay, child-free, dragon-themed wedding. I agreed. During the process of dress and shoe picking, him and the best man would shoot down all of my ideas. She would send very basic heels that were around $100. Heck no. I told her my budget was $45 for shoes, especially for plain gold heels. The wedding party all had a very mean girl mentality. I felt it from day one. There was the wedding party and then me. I chalked this up to not really knowing them well and all of them living in a different state than me. They even went as far as saying the shoes I like were too promiscuous. After this I begged to come as a guest. That way I could wear what I wanted and not feel this weird mean girl mentality from the rest of the wedding group. My brother says, "No way, I can't get married without you being by my side." I get to the state the wedding will be at and the first day I'm there I find out the best man had the bachelor party the night before I got there. Everyone from the wedding party was included aside from me. I let it go and focused on the wedding and doing my part. On the day of the wedding, I slapped on some fairy wings, danced my way down the aisle and gave my fairy wedding speech. All went well. The wedding was awesome until the drag show. Yes, they had a drag show at their wedding. During the show, one of the queens comes on and basically announces that this was all fake because my brother and his partner had gotten married 1 year prior. I turned to the rest of the wedding party and asked if they knew. They did. They were at the real wedding. Everyone but me. I'm sitting there trying to process and my mom, who gave them $3,000 for the wedding because they needed it, storms up to ask if I knew. I told her no. She immediately switched to being supportive to me because of how bad the situation was. It wasn't about them already being married. They can do what they want. We were pissed. I myself spent over $4,000 on this wedding. Because I was coming from out of state, I had to get a plane ticket and I paid for a week at an Airbnb. The dress for the wedding. The fairy wings I handmade. All of it. I spent too much time and money on this wedding. But then I started to remember all of the lies. They got married last year. 3 days after, my brother was at my house while I gave birth to my last child because I always wanted him to be a part of my huge moments. He held my newborn knowing he had just gotten married and said nothing. They gaslighted me, saying I was crazy for feeling left out. Telling me he can't get married without me. Lying to my face every single day for a year. After realizing all of this I tried to leave without making a scene. His husband mockingly asked me if I was mad. I said I'd talk to them another day and they should enjoy their night. I was able to leave without anyone else at the wedding knowing I was upset. But before I could leave, the happy couple pulled me into a room. My brother cried, saying he didn't do this to hurt me. I kept it together and told them to enjoy their night and we will talk another day. His husband then says, "Oh, so there is something to talk about then?" I told him once again that we could talk another day. They then asked me to brunch. I told them I'd see if I'm up for it when they go. The next morning I realized the whole wedding party and some guests are going to lunch. I choose not to go because I am not going to put myself in a situation where I am ganged up on again over my feelings about the wedding and wedding party. After that I left the wedding chat on Snapchat. At this point it's the next morning and his husband starts blowing up my phone. I ignore it and go about my day. I have not looked at or spoken to my brother since, aside from short responses to get me to the airport the day I left. When I left, I asked them to crop me out of the wedding photos as I didn't want to be associated with a fake wedding. I also didn't want a reminder of how embarrassing it was and how stupid I looked. I told them I didn't want to speak to them again. My brother said nothing. His husband on the other hand tells me, "You're a narcissist and I feel bad for the people who have to deal with you." This coming from the guy who tricked 100 people into coming to a wedding just to tell everyone, "Haha, this was just a giant party for us." Joke's on you. I just don't know where to go from here. I have them both blocked. There is a line in our family. My brother has not tried to fix it. He had the chance to show me what I meant to him and he did. My crazy sister-in-law demanded to choose my flower girl and called me a bridezilla saying that my wedding was for the whole family not just me. I'm getting married in a few weeks. Well, a while back I asked my sister-in-law Sadie to be my bridesmaid. My fiancé warned me that she could be intense and I was under no obligation to include her in the wedding party, but she had been nice enough and I wanted to have a certain number of bridesmaids. I am now regretting my decision. Sadie has a boyfriend Kyle. He has partial custody of his ex's infant daughter, not sure why considering he is not related to her but I never asked. Recently Sadie had been on my case about picking a flower girl. I wanted to be my friend's daughter since I have a fantastic relationship with her and was actually in the room for her birth. I even refer to her as my niece. Sadie, however, didn't take this well. When I told her she blew up and started ranting about how she will ruin the pictures. My niece is neurodivergent and tends to get overstimulated when standing for long periods so photos may be a challenge for her. I tried to explain to Sadie that my niece was practically family and me and her mother have been making a plan to ensure that the photos won't be overwhelming for her. Sadie then took the opportunity to suggest Kyle's daughter. I explained to her that I was in the delivery room when my niece was born and I wanted her to be a part of my big day since my fiancé proposed. I thought that was that until about 2 weeks ago. I got a special dress for my niece that looks like a cross between my dress and my bridesmaid dresses. I was showing it to my family when Sadie gave me a gift bag. Inside was an identical dress but for a baby. Sadie then confessed to snooping around my laptop to find the dress I chose for my flower girl and took the opportunity to order one for her boyfriend's daughter. She then said both girls could be a pet of my special day. When I said no, she started screaming at me. Because it was bad enough that her boyfriend wasn't a groomsman and that I should want him to be a part of the family, especially since my wedding was for the whole family, not just me. She called me a selfish bridezilla and stormed out. My fiancé apologized for not communicating just how crazy she can get. So after a few days of thinking, Sadie was disinvited from the wedding by my fiancé due to how she treated me. I am looking into hiring security and maybe changing the venue without telling her so she won't cause trouble. My fiancé wants to include his high school sweetheart in his wedding party, so I told him that if she's at his wedding party then I won't be in the altar. My fiancé and I have been dating for about 4 years and engaged last year. Before dating, my fiancé dated his childhood best friend, Liz, for 8 years. They were briefly engaged before calling it off. From what I was told, they decided to break it off because they were getting married for the wrong reasons. They were planning to get married because it was the next step, and since their families were best friends, he needed to marry her. After they broke off the engagement, they remained friends. Since the beginning of our relationship, I knew Liz was in my fiancé's family lives. Liz and my fiancé's moms are best friends. Liz is also best friends with his younger sister. My fiancé and her are friends in the same social circle. I don't have a problem with Liz and her friendship with my fiancé. I like her as a person and would consider her a friend. However, sometimes we hang out, and I feel left out, like I am the third wheel, because of their inside jokes and shared childhood stories. I have always tried to be open-minded about their friendship since he assured me they are only friends, and I do trust both of them. My fiancé and I are finalizing our wedding party now. Since we both have best friends of the opposite intimacy, we agreed it's okay to have the opposite intimacy at our wedding party. I told him who I wanted to ask to be at my wedding party. He mentioned that having his sister participate in my wedding would greatly benefit him. I got along well with his sister and agreed to include her. When he listed his wedding party, he mentioned Liz. I was taken aback. I told him I wasn't uncomfortable having her attend the wedding party. I told him I was happy to have her attend the ceremony and reception, and that she can sit with his family and be in the family pictures. However, that wasn't good enough for him. He said that it was his wedding party and that it was his decision who was going to be at it. That I have the right to choose my wedding party, so he should be able to choose whoever he likes. I told him that's unfair because I'm not having my high school sweetheart at my wedding party. This is becoming a huge fight between us. He said he was putting his foot down, and Liz was going to be at his wedding party. I told him that I would not budge on this. Out of anger, I told him to choose me or her. If she's at the wedding party, then I won't be standing at the altar. He responded by telling me that I was acting crazy and that he would go stay with his brother until I calmed down and be reasonable. It has been 3 days now. He has texted me twice since the fight. First time to ask me if I have calmed down and am ready to be reasonable. The second is to ask me if I have agreed with his wedding party list. I told him my answer was still no, and I didn't know if I could let this one go. Update: we did talk. We both laid out where we stood in our reasonings. He insisted that Liz be at his wedding party. His POV is that he wants to share his biggest life decision with his closest friends, friends that have stayed by him since he was a baby. I get that. I truly do, and I also want my best friends to stand there. It did make me feel like the asshole for being so against it. However, I can't change how I think. I still don't want her to be in the wedding party, but I'm willing to let it go. However, this fight did bring a lot of issues to the surface. For one, her involvement in our relationships going forward. Second, he can walk away easily during a fight. I don't accept how this fight went about. Marriage is forever. We will have bigger fights in the future, but a fight should never end with one side walking away. Third, I was unhappy with his insistent request for her to be at our wedding party. If the role had been reversed and he had insisted that my best friend not attend the wedding, I would have done so because it's our day, not just mine. I believe compromise is important in a marriage. I didn't see any signs of his willingness to compromise. So, after all that, we are still engaged. However, we have decided to postpone setting a date for the wedding. We are thinking of maybe a wedding sometime in late 2025. We are going to see if we can build back the trust that we had and if we can build a stronger foundation for our relationship. My horrible sister dropped me as a maid of honor at her wedding because her in-laws learned that I am divorced. So I told her I would not be at her wedding party at all. For background, Stella and I are identical twins, and her wedding comes around this fall. I had her as my maid of honor 8 years ago and she promised me I could be hers when her wedding came around. My marriage fell apart just over 2 years ago, due to a stillbirth and my husband's infidelity. My parents and sister were the only reason I didn't drown from the stress, loneliness, and total abandonment of my spouse. Anyway, Stella and John got engaged last year. The biggest caveat is that they must be married in John's family's church, full mass with communion. The family is on board because this will be a very big wedding. Today, Stella invited me to dinner, as they had finally reserved a date for the church and reception, assuming it was to ask me to be her mo formally. I was excited since I hadn't been to a wedding party aside from my wedding. John was with her, which was weird because Stella didn't mention him coming in our texts about the dinner. We hugged like usual but John didn't. Weirder. After we got our drinks, they got to it. In a nutshell, John expressed the following: despite my best efforts to keep it secret, my parents found out that you're divorced when they asked why your husband wasn't coming. They are no longer comfortable with you as Mo because it won't look good to the church if my family hears about the divorce. You can be a bridesmaid but can't mention the divorce or your conditions during the wedding events. I was stunned, and I felt tears in my eyes. Stella started crying too, and she tried to spin it in a good way. This is way less stressful for you, so it's a good thing. Mother-in-law has approved my BFF as my mo, so please don't make this any harder. I knew that I couldn't possibly stay there through an entire meal. I had to process this new info alone. I didn't speak. I just paid for my wickedly expensive cocktail, and left to order an Uber home. A few hours ago, I texted Stella that I would not be at her wedding party at all. That was my decision. She wouldn't take this as an answer, so I had to temp block her due to her excessive texts and calls. I sent my parents a summary of what happened and promised to call them when I was in better shape tomorrow. Stella thinks that this is a total overreaction. I don't even want to know what John thinks at this point. Update: Stella has officially called off the wedding. Stella actually came undone on him and began calling out everything that John and his family had put her through. Then she took off the ring and chucked it across the living room. John went into a rage, and while he didn't do anything but yell at her, he threatened her in regards to her mobility issues. Stella uses a cane to walk. This was what triggered her to text our parents and myself. By the time our parents made it to the house, John was gone and she had packed up her bags and left with them. Her cane was not in the house.